Welcome to the 11 Warriors show for Friday, November 1st, 2024. Jason Priestis, Chris Lauterbach, got our dude Kyle Jones joining us from Chicago today. How you guys doing?
Doing well, man. I was ravaging trick-or-treat candy all last night and, had a little bit for breakfast today, so I feel great.
Yeah, just fighting off the stomach ache that usually comes the morning after, Reese's for breakfast.
This is like the worst 3 months of the year to try to eat well. Just all like steamrolling right at us because Thanksgiving's tough and then the holidays in December. It's just like I gave up like almost a year ago. I just stopped eating sweets altogether because you know how like as an adult, it's easy to just get a candy bar at a gas station because no one can tell you no now. And you're just like, I'm going to get a candy bar. And like, so I stopped that and I've done a really good job of it. I'll still have sweets for birthdays and events and things like that. But Halloween not helping at all. I mean, you just got a bowl of like Reese's cups sitting there. What are you supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I did. Kids sorted it out and put it in bags, and I'm like, all right, guys, time for bed. And then, I've been sneaking in it ever since. I don't have your willpower, that is for sure.
Oh, well, it's not special. Just don't buy it. You can't eat it, right? Keep it out of the
I didn't buy this, but
well, that's true. Are you doing the kid candy draft and you're like trying to hype up candy corn to take the good stuff from them?
Not yet. I don't think they're just not old enough for that yet. They just see it as like a big takeaway. So that's why I don't even take it when they're awake. I wait till they're asleep. But I can't wait for those days. We can get a little fantasy draft going and Dad can get a stash and we can trade.
Kyle, you live in a pretty dense part of the country. Do you have a lot of people knocking on the door for Halloween?
So we live in an apartment building, but we've got the toddlers in the building, that they come up and down, which like, then you're the jerk because they know, oh, Kyle didn't give me any good candy. Like, you have to actually like come correct and like give them, it's almost like Christmas where it's like, you got to give your nieces and nephews like a good gift. I got to give the neighbor kids like, ooh, I'm going to give them like a good candy bar, like that whole thing. Like, and you can't do the little ones. You got to give like a big one. Cause I know I'm just basically giving it to their parents anyway. Yeah, so like I can't be a jerk.
Making it rain with the full size bars. Huh?
Yeah, well, because I'm like, I'm giving this to the kid. And I know the kid's going to have two pieces and then like mom and dad are each going to have like 40% each. So like, I'm really doing it for, my neighbors more than anything.
That's good work, Kyle. My neighborhood. Yeah. I think my kids probably got 10 or 12 like full size candy bars each, probably something like that. But I don't go that far. I leave a couple buckets out with what I think are some pretty good stuff, but not doing full size. Not if I'm not physically there to hand it out and feel like I can get some, some FaceTime credit for it.
Are you one of those please take one houses? Is that where you guys are at right now?
There's just a bucket out there.
You both want to go with the kids? Is that
doesn't have too many rules? But yeah, I mean, this at their age, we both have to go. Sometimes they split up or whatever. You can't, two of us have to go to kind of corral them. But when they're old enough to do it themselves, I won't hide. I won't pass out candy bars, and I might do fulls then because, like I said, I can take some credit for it. But when I'm not there, I'm not leaving a bucket out there with those because I know what will happen. Because if it was me going by there, it'd be like, Blip. Like that whole damn thing would be in my bag. Like, peace out.
That's always one of the most rage-inducing times of the year. The few days after Halloween, when everyone's posting like ring doorbell videos of people just stealing all the candy. It's like, come on, man.
It's low level.
It is people. Huge show today. Ohio State reshuffles its offensive line ahead of the team's next biggest test of the season. Got a deep dive on what to expect between number 4 Ohio State and number 3 Penn State tomorrow. The wild dash to the Big Ten championship in Indy, and the Power 4 somehow fumble the headset communications rollout, which is, we'll get into that later, is baffling. But let's start, guys, with the offensive line. Your dude Zen Michalski was in for Josh Simmons against Nebraska last week. And Kyle, you think he struggled in the first quarter, but then kind of came on and of course, suffered the injury in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I mean, he had a tough first couple drives. That second drive, they called it on the broadcast for people that were watching at home. He got beat outside or beat inside a couple times. And, that happened. It was clearly like a little bit amped up, adjusting to the new pace of the game. But I thought he actually like settled in. I thought he was pretty decent in the run game, not like spectacular or anything like that. But, because they ran that package of highlights in the first quarter where Klatt called it out, I think people came away with the impression of like he was just a turnstile all game long, and that's not necessarily true. So, he got a little bit more comfortable. He was a little bit better as the game went on, but you hate seeing somebody like that. Their first real time they get a chance to play and they can't even finish the game because they go down. It's tough.
Yeah, I saw another writer or a commentator in the Ohio State scene say it was maybe the worst performance out of a Buckeye in 20 years of covering the team. And I was like, did you see Denzel Burke at Oregon? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, yeah, Zinn wasn't amazing, but let's keep some perspective. Day did hedge a bit on whether Zinn would be available to go at Penn State. Kind of seemed to say he would be there at tackle, then caught himself. He's like, I don't know if he's got the job kind of thing, Chris. The unit struggled against Nebraska, but Nebraska's got a sneaky underrated defensive front. So I'm not going to get too worked up over that. Who do you expect, Chris, going left or right? Do you expect to see for Ohio State when they line up against Penn State?
I think the only thing I'm sure of is that Zinn Mahosky will not be the left tackle. I hear what you're saying, Kyle. I do think he got better and I know he's hurt. I think he got a little better as the game went on, but I'm somewhere in between what Kyle said and whoever it was that said it was the worst performance in 20 years, because I don't know. I felt like he was beat on other plays outside the first quarter. You expect some of that. I mean, I put more of that at the feet of Justin Fry than I do Zinn Mahosky, quite honestly, but I think Donovan Jackson is, going to have to kick out and be the left tackle, and Seth's going to be at center. It sounds like Tegra will still be right guard and Fryer will be right tackle. But left guard, I guess we'll see. Right, Hinsman's name came up yesterday when Day was talking. I know some other folks maybe feel like they've got some some inside info that maybe Hinsman will come out of nowhere. It was a starter last year and he wasn't bad. Whatever happened during the bowl time with him hopping on a podcast and whatever, seems like things haven't gone well since then for him. But I mean, I would be fine if that materializes and Hinsman is the left guard. But I guess we'll see. I think the main thing is I think you pretty much can almost Sharpie in, right, that Donovan Jackson's going to be the left tackle. My question is, I feel like Donovan has got some accolades, right? As a left guard, I'm no offensive line coach, but I feel like this year, I don't know that we've seen the best of Donovan Jackson. I've sometimes wondered if he's still hurt, kind of thing. So while I will say I think he has to play left tackle, I don't know that makes me brim with confidence. I don't think he's going to look like Mahosky did. But I also don't know that you should just assume he's going to be awesome out there, because I'm not sure that he's been awesome at left guard this year. But Kyle maybe more is the film study guru. If Jackson is at left tackle, what are you thinking is an expected type performance from him there?
Well, I think they're going to help whoever's there. You know what I mean? And
sure.
the good news for that is that Josh Fryer quietly played probably the best game he's ever played in an Ohio State uniform on Saturday. He was very good in pass pro, good in the run game. He was moving people. I think a lot of folks thought he was kind of the weak link coming into the season in the first few games of the year. I showed some clips and other people, you didn't have to be an O-line coach to say like, man, this guy doesn't look like an O-line, an Ohio State right tackle of the past, but credit to him. He looked a lot better. And so if he's able to stand up and, he's able to play on his own a little bit more, then they can move protection and kind of help whoever's on the left side, whether it's a guard and tackle. So, that certainly helps a ton to just be able to say like, hey, Josh Fryer's a guy that we can rely on a little bit more than maybe we had in the past.
Day did seem to, if you're an astute observer of how he talks and what he says, he did seem a little confident. They maybe found something, and we'll have to see what we get on Saturday. Another guy back, Lathan Ransom, supposed to be back. Again, the Ryan Day injury game. Who knows if it's he's going to be back and he's not back, or he will be back. But this is the kind of game you want to use a guy like that for if he's truly ready. Chris Jordan Hancock was fantastic in his absence, man. Game-sealing interception, 5 stops, forced fumble. Jalen McClain saw some action as well. Again, Day said he's ready to go. What are you expecting to see him out there, and how big of an addition Ransom to the defense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's been really strong all year. I know, Kyle, you've been a fan of him as well. I think Downs has kind of freed him up. I remember we were talking earlier in the season when Kyle was on the show. We were talking about who might lead the team in tackles this year and things like that. And Kyle, you basically said that with Downs' presence that we watch out for Ransom to do that. And I think he's 4th on the team in tackles or whatever. But your point was well taken and has materialized as far as him really being a playmaker on the back line there. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the way Day is talking, it seems like, you should expect that he will be back. I thought he might be a little bit more reserved and just pop that as a game time type thing. But yeah, at this point, I think you got to feel like Ransom is in there, which is great because obviously it lets Hancock return to Hancock did great, but he's also an elite nickel. So seeing him out there, player would be good. I guess maybe, another question for you, Kyle, is that, a lot of these 4-3 sets, and we might see some of that this weekend when they bring in 3 linebackers, they've been taking Hancock off the field. And I'm not sure where I'm totally at. I feel like Hancock is such a good player. You're taking him off the field for a lesser player that just may weigh more. And I'm just wondering your feeling on that at a game like Penn State, where it is a matchup game where they are physical, is 4-3. And I know it can depend on situations, down and distance and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, should Hancock be off the field that much?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the down and distance are going to have as much to do with it as personnel, candidly. Everybody knows we'll talk about Tyler Warren. He's the big story going into this game for Penn State's offense and what he can do. He's super athletic. So yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where, no offense, like Cody Simon's having to run downfield with Tyler Warren or cover him in the open field. You don't want that necessarily. Reese and Styles are certainly athletic, but you'd feel more comfortable if they're throwing the ball that you've got someone like Hancock or Ransom, or even Downs. I think is actually, that's what I'm most curious about is how do they use Downs to kind of cancel out the Tyler Warren effect, which I'm really interested to see. So it's a great question. And I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see it as simply, oh, they're in 2 tight ends. Great, 3 linebackers, like one, that very simple trade. I think the down and distance, the situation, what are they doing with him? Because the other tight end is truly like an inline, and I'm blanking on his name, but he's number 16. He's a much more traditional inline tight end, and they move Warren all over the place. He's effectively their slot receiver, kind of the way the Chiefs use Travis Kelce, right? So, I think your point is taken that, having Hancock and Ransom out there at the same time could be very valuable to this team on Saturday because, Penn State's going to look to get 44 the ball.
Speaking of value to the team, defensive line, the front 4 played basically 85% of the snaps against Nebraska. Day said this week he wanted to see a little bit more rotation there. Was happy, the team got the stops when they needed to, but wants to see Caden McDonald, Hiro Kanu, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, some of these other young guys to keep the guys at the front fresh in the fourth quarter. Last week, they figured out a way to get more pressure after, leaving Oregon with absolutely no pressure. So there's some tinkering going on over there. What do you guys kind of expect?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest piece is what is the situation? They couldn't rotate out of that main front 4 very much in Oregon because a lot of those third downs were 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. Whereas last weekend against Nebraska, those were 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 passing downs. And you saw, great, we're going to put 4 defensive ends out there. I thought Jackson's name being kind of in the mix of somebody who needs to play more, like he played a ton on Saturday. 97's out there all the time. Anytime there's a passing situation, he's out there on the field. So I think at the D end spot, those guys are getting plenty of rotation because they're coming in on 3rd downs. And so that's also a way to get your tackles off the field, right? You don't need Hiro Kanu and Caden McDonald to spell the defensive tackles. If your tackles are only playing 2 downs, then you're coming in on 3rd and forcing a punt. Like those guys can be your D tackles every play if that's the only time they got to be out there. So I think a lot of it just has to do with the flow of the game. And also, when you get in games like this where it's against top flight opponents, you want your top guys out there. There's going to be games the next couple weeks, right? Against Purdue and Northwestern, where you can let the younger guys get more reps and you can give Tyleek and JT and Jack, those guys, some time. They can skip a series and it's probably not going to kill you, right? So if you want to keep them fresh for the stretch run, I get it. This is not the game to be thinking about saving your legs.
Yeah, well said. Chris, Arvell Reese is a go. We all saw what happened late in the Nebraska game. He was called for targeting, wiped out, an OSU fumble recovery. And I can only imagine if Nebraska would have cashed in on that drive and somehow Ohio State lost. And then on Monday, the Big Ten's like, yeah, that shouldn't have been targeting.
Sorry.
Buckeye fans are already wound up enough. There would have been some damage done there. He's a hell of a player, freak athlete, man. Just a guy that jumps off the screen. What do we expect from him Saturday? I know he got the start against Nebraska in the 4-3, just the second time that he's gotten the start. But this is another game where, his type of skill set may be called upon.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of what I was, we were chatting about a few minutes ago with Tyler Warren and 4-3 versus taking Jordan Hancock off the field. Because if you're taking Hancock off the field, generally that's who you're taking him off for. I think it does depend on down and distance and that kind of thing. I think Reese has got a bright future. I think he's really good. I don't think he's a better football player than Jordan Hancock right now, but that's a compliment to Hancock, not a diss to Reese. Reese has got a real bright future. So I would imagine he's going to see some snaps this weekend for sure. I like what he does. He's obviously super athletic. I'm just glad he's able to play because it's just nobody knows what targeting is. Still don't know what targeting. I don't know. I just know that watching that, there was no intent to injure. There was no intent to, lead at the head or, any of those buzzwords. It was like, man, what a good football play. I almost felt like he was trying to make sure he didn't get called for targeting and he still did, So, I'm just glad the dude's not penalized and miss part of a game like this coming up because of something like that last week. And what really was an awesome play. And I mean, Ohio State recovered that fumble, right? It's just, it didn't matter, right? So that Nebraska got the yardage because they called it a catch and a fumble, and then they got the 15 on top of it.
Right, yeah, able to convert and move the chains, and it did kind of fizzle out after that. But I mean, for a minute, you're like, man, this is kind of an important play here. What are we doing? Your 4th-ranked Buckeyes head to Penn State tomorrow to face the number 3 Nittany Lions. College game day will be on site. 13th time in this series, kind of breaking a tie for the record for most between two teams with LSU and Alabama. Fun fact about Penn State. You guys know it was founded in 1855 as Farmers High School of Pennsylvania? I didn't know that until this week.
Did not.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how do you, what's the process to go from high school to college? Like, how does that work? I'm curious about that. Games at Beaver Stadium. It's a big noon kickoff on Fox, which is fantastic for us because I'm convinced that night games and whiteouts at that stadium basically give them 8 points, and a noon game might only give them 2.5 points, and we'll take that. Speaking of the line right now, Ohio State's favored by 3. Opened up at Buckeyes minus 4.5, so some money is coming in on Penn State. And to be fair, there's some questions right now after a close win in Nebraska, losing to Oregon. The fan base is a little bit shook, so we'll see what shakes out. Nittany Lions have lost 6 straight as home dogs, so that's one to keep an eye on. Going to have good weather, 53 degrees, 0 chance of rain, single-digit wind. Just a nice little afternoon for football. Penn State's coached by James Franklin. 11th season there. Really good dude, man. Liked by his peers. I bumped into him a couple of times at Big Ten Media Days. He's just friendly to everyone. He's a good dude. He's one of those guys you can tell, like, it's not fake. He's a really good dude. Worked his way up, man. I love this aspect, too, man. He played quarterback at D2 East Stroudsburg in Pennsylvania, which I pulled up their stadium on Google Maps. It's smaller than like every OCC stadium in Central Ohio high school football. I'm like, that's their stadium? Like, Hilliard's got a twice the size stadium. So went to be a wide receiver coach at D2 Kutztown, and then defensive back coach back at East Stroudsburg. And this is really fun. One of the stops in his career, he was the offensive coordinator for the Roskilde Kings of the Danish American Football Association. Went over to Denmark and won a national championship as the OC, and you don't often see that on coach resumes. Then James Madison, Washington State, Idaho State, Vanderbilt, Penn State, kind of worked his way up. So I respect that. He wasn't given. There's some guys, Ohio State had a defensive coordinator recently who was kind of given some things that he didn't earn, and there's some of those guys out there, and he did not. So he's been cursed, though, to play in Ohio State's division for his entire existence at Penn State. Kind of breaking free a little bit this year because the man's, otherwise has pretty good teams, but he's 1-9 against Ohio State. Basically 2-8 against top 10 competition outside of Ohio State. The poster child, guys, for the guy that the CFP expansion is like the biggest gift this guy could ever get. It's taken so much heat off his lap. He's first all time in FBS wins and win percentage by a black head coach. Did not know that either until this week. Series wise, Bucks are 24-14-0. They've won 7 straight against Penn State, which sounds wild. I mean, like, these used to be just battles, and they still are. We'll get into that. Last meeting, 2023, number 3 Ohio State 20, number 7 Penn State 12. That's when Marv went off for 162. Had a touchdown with about 4 minutes to play. Franklin's lone win, we all remember 2016 in State College when OSU led 21-7 entering the fourth quarter, and Penn State rattled off the final 17 of the game. Those last 7 points on a 60-yard blocked field goal. I just remember, you guys remember watching that? It was like slow motion training.
They had a timeout. They had a timeout.
Urban, what are you trying to rush the unit onto the field? It gets blocked. The guy scoops it and you're just watching and you're like, this is it. So that was fun. And close games, man. 5 of the last 6 meetings were one-score games entering the fourth quarter. Expect a lot of that tomorrow. Penn State, again, I think they're, 7-0 right now? Yeah, sounds right. 7-0 overall, 4-0 in the Big Ten. Opened the season with a 34-12 win at West Virginia. And then they squeaked by now 4-4 Bowling Green by 1 score at home before throttling Kent State the following week. Handed Illinois their first loss of the season, 21-7. And everyone beats UCLA. They did that the following week. Tied USC on the road with 2:54 to play to force overtime before winning that one with a field goal. Kyle, that was a super weird game.
I mean, Penn State looked like they were going to lose by 3 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, it was not close through the first half. I mean, USC moved the ball at will. Looked like they could do whatever they wanted. And then Lincoln Riley decided he didn't want to be a premier head coach in the Big Ten, apparently. And that's just what happened. I'm out.
Yeah. One of those.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, they turned it over and had some of it was bad luck, but it was just like they just wanted to let it honestly looked like they had money on Penn State to cover. We're like, we got to let these guys back in. I'm not saying they did, but that's what it felt like watching.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say it felt like it. It looked like it, but surely Lincoln Riley would not do that. Took care of a pesky Wisconsin 28-13 in Madison last week. And heading into this one, Chris, the big question, the huge question, is Drew Allar going to go? And Franklin said Monday it was a game time decision. Later in the week, we saw him doing drills at Penn State practice. They're also prepping 2 quarterbacks. They've got, Bo Pribula, slightly different styles that Ohio State has to kind of prepare for. But again, he did drills on Wednesday. I don't know about you, Chris. I think he's going to play. I mean, there's no doubt that, in my mind at least, that he'll be out there for the first time.
I agree. He's going to start. He's going to play. You're going to rehab all week. He's a veteran. You want to get some reps in there, obviously, but they're going to make sure he's ready to go for Saturday. Franklin is right to slow play it, and Day's talked about how you're going to have to prepare for both guys. And really, I mean, I think Pribula's been in every game. He comes in and runs a couple times, kind of deal. Like, they don't really bring him in to throw much. I think at Kent State he had like 9 attempts or something like that, but pass attempts. But I think he's ran the ball literally in every game, and it hasn't always been mop up. They bring Franklin likes to do some weird stuff from time to time, trick plays or just, some other craziness. So that kid's been in there a few times, but yeah, I would, know nothing, but I would be stunned if Allar was not starting this game and looking pretty good. And they obviously need him if they're going to, they're not going to win with the backup in there. Allar's been really good. I mean, last couple of times we saw him, I was like, hey, is this guy ever going to evolve? Like, it's a lot of talk, but really no action. Like a lot of 5-yard like they didn't trust him at all to throw it more than 10 yards downfield against Ohio State anytime I've seen him. But he's working on 5 straight games of at least 70% completion, and 3 of his 4 picks came in that USC game before he kind of led them back. So he's put together a nice season so far without really much on a playmaker perspective. Certainly not much big playability on the outside from receivers.
Yeah, they got one we know, Julian Fleming, who's got 10 for 148 and 0 touchdowns on the season. Julian did have 2 big catches against USC in that game.
Yeah, had a couple. I know one fourth down was big. Yeah.
But Allar's kind of turned the corner. I mean, you spoke about how he played against Ohio State last year, and it was almost like he felt bad for because he was an Ohio State fan growing up in Northeast Ohio. And Kyle, like I wanted Ohio State to win the game, but I'm like, man, it's got to be awful for this dude to come out and play against the team he wanted to play for, just lay this monster egg.
Well, I mean, they couldn't protect him. That was the biggest thing. This is the JT Tuimoloau out week, if it's ever going to be one, right? The last couple of years, he
hates Penn State.
He's a different dude. And it was the same case last year. They could not block him. And you could tell Allar was just shook. It was like you hear like quarterbacks seeing ghosts. Like, it sure looked like this dude just had no confidence in what was happening every time he dropped back. They're different this year. Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator, came from Kansas, is doing a lot of cool stuff with them. It reminds me a lot from when Joe Moorhead went there, 8 years ago, whenever that was, and kind of really redid their offense. I don't think there's a Saquon Barkley on that offense, though. I think it's the big difference is that, Warren's, a special player, but he's not as explosive. So They do a lot of interesting stuff. They throw a lot of screens. They throw a ton of formations. They do all kinds of crazy stuff where they like split a tackle out and then they run him in motion to like just absolutely clean out a defensive end. Like they do some weird stuff, which like helps Allar. But at the end of the day, like if he's got to drop back and, throw to Julian Fleming on 3rd and 8 with JT Tuimoloau out in his face, like that feels like it's going to be in Ohio State's favor.
You guys feel like JTT is going to have another big game? Like, is this just what he does? Is blows Penn State up once a year and then kind of plays, pretty well the rest of the year?
Well, I mean, Penn State doesn't have great tackles, so that helps. Like they're better on the interior.
Somehow they're 3rd nationally in sacks allowed, only giving up 1 a game, 2.9 TFLs allowed. They're doing a good job of keeping guys away from Allar. And JTT is going to have to kind of have a big game to get some early pressure, to force them into some things they don't want to do. You guys talked earlier about Tyler Warren. He's 3rd in the Big Ten in catches per game. Big dude, 6'6". Penn State's always got tight ends that can catch the ball. And Chris, I know you were talking about maybe Hancock earlier. Who else do you kind of see Ohio State putting on Warren to kind of neutralize what he can do out there?
Well, I think, I'm sure Penn State's going to try to move him around a little bit. I think that's probably a better question for Kyle, honestly. But I would imagine they're going to try to move him around and get him in some different matchups. But, the thing about Warren is, that USC game, he's our leading receiver by a pretty good margin. But even that USC game, like a lot of that is like, how does this not fall on USC? He had 17 catches for 224. His long was 34. So it's not like he got behind him a couple times for 60-yarders or whatever. Like he was just killing them all day long on, kind of intermediate type stuff. So, I'd be interested to see how much zone Ohio State plays, how many times they're in man on him, that type of thing. So I don't know. My guess is it's a by committee type thing that is covering Warren on Saturday. But again, I think Kyle, you're probably more equipped to answer that than I am.
Yeah, I don't think it's as simple as who's the guy that's going to cover him, because they move him around so much that as a defense, you can't just rely on so-and-so is going to mirror him. They put him in the backfield. So if it's Caleb Downs, what are you going to do? Play Caleb Downs at nose tackle? What are you going to do there? So that's the kind of the challenge. And I think Dave spoke about it yesterday on the radio, where he was like, we've spent all week just focusing on knowing where he lines up, when he lines up in this situation. What does that mean? When he lines up over here, what does that mean? And just being prepared for all those situations. What I think that is going to probably drive Ohio State fans a little bit nuts is we saw a ton of blitzing last week against Nebraska, right? They amped up the pressure. They were blitzing linebackers on 1st down to try to, create negative plays. I don't think that's going to happen as much, because I think what's going to be is a little bit more vanilla, make sure everybody's in position and make sure that Penn State has to drive and complete 8 passes to Tyler Warren, right? Like that's the big thing, because they're not, I think they feel pretty good about Burke and Igbinosun on the outside against these receivers, right? Like they know what Flem can do. They know what the other guys can do. So I think they're going to say, great, we just don't want to get beat by 44 and those running backs. And they're going to keep everything in front of them and make them have to chip away and chip away and chip away. And then as we'll get to, just hope that, they break a Jeremiah Smith touchdown enough times, kind of like last year where it was Marv who made the difference. Who's it going to be for the Ohio State offense that kind of wins the battle of attrition?
Yeah, well said. Chris, you talked about how Warren cooked on USC. I'm convinced that outside of Oregon, West Coast teams don't know what tight ends are. So they were like, they didn't even know he was eligible to catch passes probably for the first 2 quarters. And they're like, hey, this dude, I mean, he's wearing 44. He's throwing him off. Shout out real quick to Penn State, too, because they're always the nuttiest team with jersey numbers. I know in college you can get away with a little more jersey number, freedom than you can in the NFL. But they got running backs in the teens. They got a defensive tackle wearing 28. It's like, what are we doing over here? So no names. I guess that's how they express themselves, right?
One last thing on Warren. I know we've talked about him a lot because he's obviously had some big games. But, if you look at 5 of the 7 games, he's not had more than 50 yards receiving. So I think he's a nice player, but he is not Freiermuth. He is not, in my opinion, he's, not super duper elite like some of these other guys were, where you did have to try to figure out ways to get the certain matchup you wanted covering him because you knew 3rd and 7, that's where they were going and you couldn't stop it. Warren's had some games where he's been fine, but he's not been, oh my God, Tyler Warren. It's really happened twice this year. So to your point, Kyle, I don't think Penn State's been particularly explosive, in general. They really don't have big, game breaking receivers. And Ohio State kind of thought that Oregon had much better receivers, but it's not like they were throwing over the top a bunch before the Ohio State game. That was part of what surprised Ohio State, right? Like Oregon was doing a lot of lateral, a lot of intermediate, get the ball out quick. Against Ohio State, they threw it over the top a bunch of times. So I'll be interested to see if Franklin, if the Penn State's offensive line holds up, do they try to take some deep shots so that, Ohio State's not, kind of collapsing or sitting on some of those things. But it's going to be an interesting game within the game on Saturday. And Warren, to me, it's just a piece of it.
Interesting. And you got to have the dudes to kind of loosen it up and take those shots. And honestly, I don't know if they do.
Trey Wallace is maybe the one guy. I know Ben Jones, who covers Penn State. I think he does really good work. I think Wallace is I had it down 22 for 350 this year, so not huge, but I feel like he's a guy maybe that could take the top off here or there. So that'd be something to watch for. Nick Singleton out of the backfield too has got 4 touchdown catches. That kind of surprised me. He's obviously versatile, but 4 touchdown catches for a back is not bad. So that's something I have to keep an eye on too.
He did a Jeremiah at Wisconsin, man. Pulled one down, one handy in the end zone. When Ohio State has the ball, there's some guys they've got to watch out for. Jalen Reed, the safety, superb, had a pick 6 against Wisconsin. Defensive tackle Zane Durant. These are 2 guys that James Franklin, his presser this week, said they deserve to be in the national conversation more. They're that good. Defensive end Abdul Carter is a guy that Ohio State's got to find every play too. He's off to a heck of a start this year. 4 sacks, 30 tackles, forced fumble. He'll create havoc. Will the offensive line hold up against these guys? Because we talked earlier, it's a little bit makeshift. We got some guys filling in for injured players. How do they do? How do they rush? How do they return to because the run game against Nebraska was not fun to watch at all. And we say that Nebraska has a sneaky, underrated defensive front. Penn State's just got a good defensive front. We know what it is. And any reason for concern, Kyle? I guess there probably is, but I guess how concerned are you?
It's just a very different stylistic matchup than Nebraska because Carter's probably the best single player that Ohio State's will face in the regular season. Like he is, you turn on the tape, like that dude is a freak. Like I can show you guys a clip of him, like somebody tried to, option him, the classic, you can't block him, you read him and, option him. He ate up the option where he had the quarterback and the running back on the same play. And the quarterback was like, I don't know what to do. This doesn't happen. Nobody's supposed to be able to do that, but he's so athletic. The problem with that is that he's still, he's not much bigger than he was last year when he was playing middle linebacker, which means that he's lining up across from a tackle who's got 70 pounds on him every single play. And so, Bruce Feldman had he did his annual before these big games, he, kind of gets all the anonymous coaches to talk, off the record and say, what do you think? And they were all like, look, he's a freak in pass coverage, but you can run at him. If you just put your beef and just run straight at that dude, you can move him. And the tape backs that up. And Zane Durant is super athletic, but he's he's a 285 pound defensive tackle. Right? He's not huge. He's 6'1". So again, it's not like this is, when Clemson had Dexter Lawrence and just, or even like the guys that Michigan have where they're just humongous and you can't move them. It's definitely a defensive line. It's all about speed. They try to use their speed. They do a lot of slants and stunts and they just try to use that athleticism and they absolutely are athletic. And so the best way you counter that is you just go right at them and you just try to hope that whoever you got there. And so if this is a lineup that for Ohio State, where if Donovan Jackson is out there, you've effectively got 4 guards on your offensive line. That means you better be able to just maul in the run game. And that's your goal. So, you run right at them and then you just get them running sideways. That's the best way to attack a team like this. And so I'd expect, Ohio State's killed Penn State with these Penn State's had a defense like this for years, right? Where they've had so many freakish speed, athletic, linebackers and defensive linemen, and they get them with screens. The J.K. Dobbins game in 2019 where he caught 4 screen passes that had 120 yards receiving, changed the game, or maybe that was 18, sorry, with Haskins. You turn on the film, teams are still getting Penn State's defense with halfback screens. It still works. Different bodies, different defensive coordinator, same philosophy. So if you're a betting man, the TreVeyon Henderson receiving over under might be a fun place to look because I would be looking to set up a bunch of halfback screens to Trey and just try to get him, to get that super aggressive athletic defensive line and just play undisciplined and play themselves out of the play.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the linebackers because for linebacker not their strongest contingent right now. Another group that can be attacked, I think, for the Buckeyes. Chris, redemption opportunity for Will Howard. Last drive at Oregon did not go the way he wanted to, went down to the turf and the clock ticked off. Got a good chance, man. Here's a matchup game, another kind of game to kind of put his stamp on it. And this is a game, too, that could come down to something late or something in the fourth quarter, making a play on the last possession. He's a guy from Pennsylvania. He said he grew up a Penn State fan, wanted to go there, and they said he wasn't good enough to play quarterback, and he's for it, man. He's going to say, he's saying, we'll see. We'll see if I am good enough. What do you expect from Will?
Well, I expect another really strong performance. I think even, last week, while it wasn't a matchup game, it wasn't in the fourth quarter with 1 minute left or 2 minutes left, you need a touchdown to win. Ohio State was trailing in the fourth quarter, and he led that team on a touchdown march when it had not really done squat for 3 or 4 or 5 drives in a row, something like that. So, I'm expecting Will to continue to make good decisions with the ball, and he's like 3 straight, 4 of the last 5. He's completed over 80% of his throws. I mean, he's been really accurate. Hell, last week he had a couple good deep shots. I know that's kind of like the Achilles heel probably for him as far as throwing the ball. The one to Tate was slightly underthrown, but the one to Jeremiah was right on the numbers. Beautiful. And the Tate one wasn't a bad throw. It was just a little bit more underthrown, just ever so slightly underthrown. But I'll be interested to see in the run game too, because I still continue to hear. I'm glad to hear Kyle bullish, a little bit more bullish about this offensive line, because he's the only person I know that is, kind of thing. But I respect his opinion a whole hell of a lot, because I'm sitting here wondering how much they may use. Will they use Howard in the run game some? Will it be that kind of game or not? Because we're talking about the Nebraska game not being able to run the ball, but it's really been since the moment Simmons was hurt. I mean, you're just going on 6 quarters now where they're averaging 1.9 yards a carry.
Wow.
That's bad, right? That's not counting. Sack adjusted is just a touch better than that, right? Like, it's just straight up ineptness with being able to run the ball. So interested to see, Howard had the read option last week where he kept it down by the goal line. I think it was the play right before the Judkins touchdown pass, right? Good decision there, kept it and got about 10 yards or so. So I'm wondering how much of that will be in the plan this week, because I'm just, you heard Urban. It was funny. We were joking about it in Slack, right? Because he was, Urban loves to run the quarterback, and he was breaking down what Ohio State needed to do to finally move the ball on the ground. And, I was like, well, I don't need to watch this to know that he's going to say run the quarterback 15 or 20 times. And damn if that isn't exactly what he
My
said.
Man wants 20 quarterback runs. We're like, I don't know if Ryan Day has that in his appetite.
Most predictable thing ever. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do wonder, how much will you use Howard in a game like this, particularly if the line can't, the 4 guards, like you said, Kyle, can't really kind of move the pile. I like hearing about an undersized defensive tackle. I love hearing all that, right? But God, at this point, I've got to see it, because the line without Simmons has sucked. So, can they move the pile this week or not?
Yeah, special teams, pretty decent. They're pretty bad at returns. Ohio State's really good at covering. They're dead last in the Big Ten in punt returns, and they're 97th in the nation in kickoff returns. So I want to say don't worry about that, but we were kind of dogging on Nebraska's kicker last week before the game, and he went in and kind of smoked some field goals. So I'm going to be careful. Guys, some really good storylines, some intangibles in this one. First one is there are 3 undefeated teams in the Big Ten left. You got Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana. If Ohio State wants to play at Indianapolis, this is a chance to beat one of them and kind of put their stamp on, hey, we want to go back to Indy. The other one is, Ryan Day gets James Franklin, two head coaches, for better or worse, with reputations right now that maybe struggle in big games. What do you make of those 2 storylines?
I mean, I love the Ryan Day versus Franklin thing, because, depending on who you ask, they're both on the hot seat for not winning the big games, even though Ryan Day beats James Franklin every time. and so it's just like this, and I'm not saying that the Penn State game doesn't matter, but I think there's a little bit of Ohio State fans take it so for granted that they'll beat Penn State because he's made it. Ryan Day's made that, this is what Ohio State does, the way that Tressel and Urban really made beating Michigan, right? There was never any question Ohio State's going to beat Michigan. Well, Ryan Day, it's not even in the conversation. Whenever people take those stats of he's 2-9 against top 7 opponents in November when it's under 45 degrees, but above 30, they do it so that the Penn State games don't count. Because every year it's a big game, it's a tight game, and Ohio State squeaks out these tough games, and Day never gets the credit for it. And so, and if you go look at the Penn State conversation, it's the exact opposite, where, hey, James Franklin's running a pretty good program to the point about like he's got to be so pumped about the playoff. Like if you're Penn State, yeah, you want to win the Big Ten, but like they can lose this game and almost certainly still go to the playoff. Like they'll win, and the rest of their schedule is not that tough. They can absolutely, and like who's going to leave 11-1 Penn State out of the playoff where their only loss is to Ohio State in what's probably a close game? Like if you're James Franklin, you're going, great, I definitely want to do it. And yet their fans have the same approach to it, which is this guy can't win the big one. He can't do it, which is just so funny given the way that some Ohio State fans talk about Ryan Day.
It's a great point about fans taking it for granted. Watch them lose to Penn State and see if they take it for granted much after that, because they absolutely will not. Chris, what about the other angle here is, there are 3 undefeated teams. They need to beat this team to kind of put a foot forward to get to Indy.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of bleeds into the last comment there, right? Of like, I think Penn State really, really wants to win this game, but they're playing this game with a margin for error. Mentally, subconsciously, whatever, they're playing this game with a margin of error that Ohio State doesn't have. I mean, Ohio State still would have a path to the playoff potentially with 2 losses, but man, just psychologically, what's that do to Ohio State kind of thing? This feels like, to me, one team is backed into a corner and needs to fight for their season right now, and then the other one is at home and, all these comforts and whatever, and, oh, by the way, if they lose it, it doesn't, completely torpedo their season in the way that it could for Ohio State. So, I think you want to beat undefeated teams for sure. But I think for Ohio State, it's more about like, hey, if you thought the Oregon loss kind of played with your destiny, lose the second game and see how nervous you are down the stretch.
Yeah, well said. Alumni of note from Penn State, Jeff Raskin, longtime Apple employee, father of the Mac. That's a pretty big deal. The computers that we all use and love. Herman Fisher, co-founder of Fisher-Price Toy Company. Also, Richard T. James, the inventor of the Slinky. I wonder what's in the water over there that they're cranking out all these toy engineers, but that's pretty cool. Adam McKay, Will Ferrell's writing partner. He co-wrote Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers with Ferrell. Keegan Michael Key, actor and comedian, Key and Peele. Some other stuff. He will be the game day guest picker. It's his second time doing that. He was there 2 years ago as well. David Morrell, author of First Blood, which gave the world the John Rambo story, and we all love and appreciate that. Patrick Fabian played Howard Hamlin on Better Call Saul. He was his nemesis in the show. And Ross Ulbricht, probably one they don't want to claim, the Dread Pirate Roberts. He's now serving a life sentence for operating the darknet marketplace Silk Road, where you could pretty much buy any drug you wanted to or commission murder. So, probably leave him off.
Never heard of that.
We are.
We are. Probably leave him off the game day program if you're smart about it. It's time for Rapid Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. First one. You need a sack and can only play one guy for one play. You choosing Sawyer or JTT?
JT, no, I don't think this is that tough a question. I think he's technically and physically the most talented guy on that line. Like, I know that he doesn't have the numbers and people love to hate on him for not being Chase Young, but I think he's still going to be a very, very good player in the NFL for a very long time, and I'll take him every day of the week.
Just want to remind everyone it's called Rapid Five. Chris? Jones over here doing the elaborate 5.
Well, I was thinking about this. I'll go JTT, even though I'm not as bullish on him as Kyle is. If it was a full game, I'd probably say Sawyer, but for one play, I like JTT's upside.
Next up, who is the best healthy offensive lineman on Ohio State's roster right now?
Seth McLaughlin.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt, Seth.
Hard to argue that. Next one, does Lathan Ransom play Saturday?
He starts. He plays the whole game.
Up next, Indiana is the blank best team in the Big Ten.
Fourth. I think their defense, I'm not full. I haven't bought it yet. The offense is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Got questions about the team.
Yeah, I was fourth. I wanted to say third to be different, but I had fourth scribbled down.
I got third too. I want to say they're better than Penn State. I could look like a fool tomorrow really quickly, but if Ohio State beats Penn State, there's no doubt Indiana's third best. Last one, the most fun one. What's the best Halloween candy?
You guys are going to hate this. Mounds.
I don't hate that. I won't say
mounds.
best.
That's
I'll
not
crush mounds all day.
That's
I'll
a top shelf
crush
answer.
them.
That's not what you expect to hear. But like, I don't hate mounds, but I didn't expect to hear mounds. I'll say it that.
I'll crush some almond joys right with it. But I'd take 5 for me, which is another one a little bit off the radar. Not quite as off the radar as mounds, but man, I could eat a bag of take 5s. No
Those
problem.
are like the bougie Reese's cups. They've just added some other like textures to
pretzel
them,
in there, a little crunch. Man, they're the truth.
I'm keeping it simple, man. I'm going to go with the Reese's Halloween pumpkins, which they're seasonal Reese's cups, the pumpkins, the trees, the Easter egg. Like I got to not have them in the house, man, because I can't stop myself from eating them. Like seriously, like I got to get it out of here. Can't do it.
What about non-chocolate? I'm adding a question. Non-chocolate treat, since we all said chocolate.
Skittles.
Oh, I mean, that's a good answer. I would say any like gummy situation, like
what kind of
like
gummy?
the Sour Patch Kids.
Yeah.
Like, those peaches, that they're like covered with sugar and they're like sweet. I can't think of like, what they're called.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, but you don't get those on Halloween typically, unless maybe that's what I should start giving up. That's how I'll become like, the king
like
of the
Chuckles or something. I feel like,
carve out your niche,
Chuckles.
man. Yeah. Chris,
I like Sour Patch Kids.
You like sour? I like them too. I should have said
gummy. I like gummy Lifesavers too.
That's fair. Starburst pretty good.
In that family.
Sprees are good. Like
Chewy Sprees are good. I like the Chewies better than the
Do your kids mess around with that freeze dried candy? Are they into that? Have you noticed those?
Freeze dried candy?
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. It's kind of deconstructed and they freeze dry it, and it'll be like a Skittle that's exploded now. And it's in a different.
Skittles is making those now. They actually have them
because they were like aftermarket freeze dried. They were like Amish shops around Ohio making them forever. But
changing my answer, nerd clusters.
Ooh, all right, that's a big hot candy right now.
Nerds,
those things are ridiculous. They still got that gummy a little bit. Kyle, definitely chewy. Those things are ridiculous.
You guys seen a
welcome to the 11 Warriors Candy Hour. This is great.
We'll do a whole show on candy if we need to, man. That's a very interesting topic. You guys speaking of, you seen the price on a bag of like Halloween candy lately, and you're like, whoa, what is this, man? So man, a little too much. Big stories this week. We're just going to get into the race for Indy because like we're, for all intent and purposes, this is November 1st. This is the month that's going to be bananas. The SEC is going to be nuts. They're all going to be nuts. There's no more conferences. It's teams watching other teams, hoping they lose to get to Indy to kind of get, to secure better position in the CFP. Top of the Big Ten, you got Oregon 8-0, 5-0 in the conference. Indiana's 8-0, 5-0 in the conference. Penn State 7-0, 4-0. Ohio State 6-1, 3-1. And then you've got, a handful of teams with 2 losses: Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Their window is closing pretty quickly. They can't, third loss are pretty much out with the teams ahead of them. 2 questions, guys. Can you get to Indy with 2 losses, do you think, this season? And then number 2, who do you have in the field for Indy? Who's your Big Ten championship finalist?
I don't think you can, because I think Indiana's schedule sets up in a way that they're probably only going to lose 1 game, and it's probably to Ohio State. I mean, unless the defense, as I kind of alluded to, really isn't there, or they just run up against a good Michigan defense and just suddenly they run into a brick wall, which always can happen. They're still without Rourke and they don't know. But I mean, the way they've been playing, you think they're going to go 11-1. Look at Penn State's schedule; they're probably going 11-1. You look at Oregon's schedule. Hard to find the other loss or, another loss on there. And so that's what, our point about Ohio State, like you got to win out. I still think Ohio State's going to. I think they're better than both Penn State and Indiana. I think at least, talent wise and capability wise when they're playing at their best. So the question is just, is that going to be the Ohio State team on Saturday? And if it is, then I think Ohio State's going to be seeing Oregon and Indy in the first weekend of December.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, man, I wish I could say something different. Yeah, I don't think you can win the Big Ten or get to the championship game with 2 losses. I just don't. I was going to say Indiana. Like, I don't know how they lose 2, right? So, I think it's still Oregon and Ohio State in Indy. But, I guess I'd take it a step further at this point from what I've seen. I would think even on a neutral field, I would still probably pick Oregon to win the rematch.
Interesting. Some games in the Big Ten this weekend. What are you guys looking out for?
I mean, Oregon versus Michigan is going to be fascinating. The Michigan defense is starting to play like the Michigan defense everybody expected, but the question is Michigan going to score against Oregon, right? And they actually like resembled a real offense last week, even though it was very clear, one quarterback is here to throw, one quarterback is here to just keep it and run, so it wasn't the most functional offense, but Michigan won a national championship by playing, by getting in rock fights in November last year. So, you never know. They might drag Oregon down into the pit. It's in Ann Arbor, but I'll just say, the Michigan fans who I know are not exactly excited about this game on Saturday. Let's just say I think some of them are making alternative plans to not have to watch all 3 hours of this game on Saturday.
That's a 3:30 kick on CBS. Oregon's favored by 14.5. A fun wrinkle. You guys, is there any world in which an Ohio State fan would consider cheering for Michigan in this game? No,
I will not be.
No, maybe is there any game theory reason to do it? I mean, because it's going to give a team you're battling with to get into Indianapolis another loss. So I can kind of see that. Impossible to cheer for Michigan. I get that, but at the same time, like, would you be busted up if Oregon lost? They're not going to, but would you?
I don't think we have to worry about it.
Just not going to worry about it. Yeah.
Strong hypothetical. Don't we usually keep the hypotheticals for the very end of the show? Because I think that's what we're talking about.
That's a good one. We should have put that in here for this week. Yeah, I'm with you guys. They're going to get murdered, and that'll be fun. Chris, what about you? What do you like this week in the Big Ten?
Yeah, obviously Michigan, Oregon will be fun to watch, but Indiana, Michigan State. I mean, we were all just talking about what we think about Indiana, and I still just keep waiting to see, will the defense ever be, not that their defense is bad, but will there ever be a point where maybe the defense lets them down a little bit if the offense has a couple turnovers or something? I know that Sig said that Rourke is going to start, so that'll be interesting to see how he looks, if he looks healthy or not. I still feel like there's just that outside chance this year that there's this one game that Childs puts it all together and just pulls something off, like almost single-handedly kind of thing. So yeah, I'm always kind of watching Michigan State, wondering if it's going to be the game that he just does some crazy stuff. But and then plus these guys, they play for a trophy, like they're playing for an old spittoon. I mean, if
that's incredible. Like
play for a spittoon on Peacock, like you have to watch that, right?
The old brass spittoon battle on Peacock. It doesn't get much more college football than that.
Right.
Indiana 8-point favorites. If they win, they would move to 9-0 for the first time ever. That's kind of fun.
That's crazy.
Another fun game out there, Wisconsin at Iowa. Both schools 5-3, 3-2 in the Big Ten. Iowa's favored by 3. That's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on NBC. Speaking of trophies, Heartland Trophy on the line for that one. Winner becomes bowl eligible. I still think back to Wisconsin's over/under win total of 6.5 from the summer, and Highs is like, man, that seems low. And sure enough, man, they could get 6 this week, and third season in a row that neither program is ranked at the time of the meeting, the longest such stretch since 1992 to 96. So some decent Big Ten games. Can't say as much for the national slate, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The hot story nationally this week was the unencrypted comms on the headsets. Like all of the Power 4 programs use a vendor called GSC, and it's the helmet communication that coaches use to talk to quarterbacks or defenders when calling plays and setting up plays. Turns out, man, this whole time they've not been encrypted. And what that means is like anyone with a scanner and some know-how could tune in and, basically listen in to what's being said the entire game. And Big 12 said, Texas Tech kind of brought the matter up and got that ball rolling. The Big 12's come out and said nobody has had an advantage. There's no nefarious stuff going on. It was just kind of like an overlook. But how does the vendor even like allow that to happen? Because granted, I didn't know a lot about helmet communication encryption until this week, but NFL, all theirs are encrypted. Like, how is that not like your default starting?
You think it's standard, right? It's not like an upgrade option.
Yeah. Some guy with a police scanner sitting in the B deck listening to everything that's being said. Like, wow, is there a way we can short GSC? Because that's not a great look for these guys.
I was going to say, before you said the vendor, I'm like, is it Fisher Price or Hasbro? Like, who's the vendor? Like, it's these G.I. Joe headsets or something. Like, come on. Unreal. So
my favorite part about it was how they're making staffers. So instead of like pushing, it's not a software update. They've got to like actually change the equipment, I believe. Yeah, and so you either have to like ship it, or if they can't ship it in time, have a staffer fly to Atlanta with the equipment, physically get it, and then fly back, which is basically like, look, West Coast teams have had a hard enough time this season. The last thing you need if you're like, the Fresno State or like imagine you're the Oregon State guys and you're like, we got to send somebody to Atlanta, send them back across the country yet again. Like This
Unreal.
is just unbelievable.
Oh, you guys wanted the encrypted one. Oh, we thought you wanted the ones we sell on Amazon at Christmas time.
Everyone can listen to the crew chief or what have you.
You don't want the high school version? Oh,
and these poor students at all these schools are wondering why their student fees to support athletics are up 10% next year. It's because they had to fly a staffer first class to get the headsets fixed. And, sorry, Johnny, you got to pay an extra $200 next season as part of your
check
tuition.
3 bags. Yeah,
unreal. National games this week. It's a week slate. We thought that before. I think it was week 6, and we're like, man, there's just a bunch of trash games on. Then all hell broke loose. So I'm kind of hoping that happens because you remember week 6, you had Bama losing at 1, Tennessee at 4, Missouri at 9, Michigan 10, USC at 11. Miami barely won that week against Cal. It was a bananas week. One of the more fun weeks we've seen in college football in the last 10 years or so. What do you guys like? I know it's slim pickings. What national games do you have your eyes on?
I mean, the traditional long storied ACC rivalry, but it's actually a really big game of Pitt versus SMU, 2 cities that hate each other, right? The Cowboys Steelers coming back to life in this sport, but it actually is 2 good teams. Like Pitt, obviously, I think everybody from Ohio State noticed, what Pitt did last week to Kyle McCord and kind of ruining his season. And SMU's good too. Like both of these teams have a very legit chance of making the playoff. Very legitimate.
My brain still can't comprehend that. Like SMU, what are we doing?
Like we've been talking about Ohio State. Ohio State might win the Big Ten, might host a playoff game. They might host Pitt. That's a real thing. They might host SMU. Those are real things that could very well happen here. And so they keep winning. They keep playing good ball. It's kind of ugly, but I think it could be fun. They both have decent quarterbacks. It's not like the kind of typical Narduzzi thing where you're like, man, they're setting offense back 20 years, but they're balancing it out by playing this incredible defense. They're watchable on offense. So, should be a good game.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Pitt's got this test and then Clemson, and then it's almost free sailing into the CFP. If they can, certainly they get by both of those. They might be a top 4 seed in the CFP. And Kyle, we knew that SMU was, once NIL got turned on, we knew SMU would be back, right? That's what they do, right? Come on now.
Yeah.
If Ohio State does host Pitt, or play Pitt, maybe we can talk to our Penn State friends and learn that 3-word chant that everyone.
West Virginia fans, they've got us covered.
That's the master. Yeah, they taught Penn State fans, and the Penn State fans will teach the rest. But it's eat shit, Pitt, and it's so catchy.
Sweet Caroline. Yeah,
Sweet Caroline. Chris, what about you, man? What games do you like this week, or what game?
You mentioned Clemson on Pitt's schedule a little bit later, but I can always hate watch Dabo. So Louisville is at Clemson on Saturday night. Clemson favored by 10. So that's what I'll keep an eye on. And I'm not going to sit here and give Dabo credit, but they've done a lot better after getting smoked, by Georgia. I couldn't rattle off what all their opponents were, but 6-1, 5-0 in the ACC after that rough start. So I will watch that one. I know it's a primetime affair. So after Ohio State at noon, after the Michigan, Oregon, and Indiana, Michigan State 3:30 appetizers. Yeah, I'll probably tune in and hate watch Dabo a little bit on Saturday night.
I can't give him credit either, but at the same time, when that Georgia shellacking took place, I'm like, oh, this is a 7-5 team.
Yeah.
And you look up, and they're 6-1. They're ranked 11th. So I'm not going to give them any love.
Yeah, they are good on D. Yeah, I thought they might flirt with a little Florida State type. Not that bad, but I thought they might crater a little bit. But yeah, their defense is too good for that shitty conference.
Unreal. I can't give them any respect, but you know what I'm saying, right? I'm going to watch watch a little bit of it, I guess. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party. They're not allowed to. Are they allowed to call it that more? They took away the Red River Shootout. They've taken away our cocktail parties. What's this sport becoming? But Florida is 4-3. They're heading to number 2 Georgia. Dogs are 14.5-point favors. That's a 3:30 game on ABC. Florida's not winning this game. I know that going in. There's zero chance. There's crazier things have happened. Kennesaw State beating Liberty happened, and that can happen. This is not going to happen. But Billy Napier's got him. I don't want to say he's saving his job just yet, but they were disastrous out of the gate. And he's quietly won, 3 of 4, lost by just 6 points at Tennessee 2 weeks ago. So make it a close game, man. Play a physical game. Hit those Bulldogs and add some wear and tear. So if Ohio State has to play Georgia later, maybe they're feeling some of that lingering effects and, get out there and do the Gator chomp and, I don't know. I'm an upset guy. I'm Team Chaos. So like most of us, I'm sure we'll be cheering for Florida at least midway through the first quarter until it gets out of hand. But we'll have those 7 or 8 minutes where, there's a glimmer of hope, and then it'll dissipate. But again, week slate, let's hope for some crazy stuff to happen because the games aren't great. All right, folks, it's time for our favorite part of the show. What's your price? We dive into the things in life we could do for the right price. We're talking about the fun, harmless stuff that doesn't hurt anyone or break the law, like driving 10 miles an hour into the speed limit for an entire year or entering a professional slap contest. All of these things have prices. What's your price? This week's question. We know the roar, Beaver Stadium, that stupid cat roar they play all the time. Kyle, what are you? But Chris, do you remember, was it 93 with Kerry Collins and John Carter, and they hung 63 on Ohio State? Yeah. I think that thing was played 200 times that day. And that has scarred me at a young age. And I was like, well, I never want to hear that thing again. So this week's question for what's your price? You have to have that Beaver Stadium cat roar piped into your house, and it randomly goes off 20 times a day while you're home for an entire month. So not the end of the world. Not the end of the world. Going to piss you off by day 2, but not the end of the world. So I don't expect you guys to be saying I need $200K for this, but there's still a price here.
Is it stadium volume level?
Oh, it's loud.
Yeah, that's
loud ass roar.
It's loud enough you can hear it throughout the house.
When you say random, that could also be what you would consider to be sleeping hours. Could you wake up to let's shit at 3 a.m? Yeah, I think we should add it.
That's a great question. I didn't think of that, but yeah, let's add that. Let's complicate it by adding that. So you're deep REM stage. You're getting your dog sawed, and it's 2:51 a.m. And you're like, God damn it.
I mean, this for a month.
For a month,
you're basically not sleeping.
You're pooping.
Well for
you're pooping, and that cat's roaring at you while you're pooping. Right? Just think of that.
That I'm much less worried about. I'm less worried about that. The fact that I'm basically going to be terrified to go to sleep and then for a month and not sleeping well, that's got long-term health effects. Yeah. So I'm going to need at least 10 grand to do this, because you're basically not that's the thing. If you can say oh, it's only going to go off during daytime hours, way down. But if I'm basically not going to be sleeping for a month, that's
a good way to look at it.
Because I mean, yeah, if it's stadium volume, to your point, you're not falling right back asleep. You're not sleeping through that.
Hypothetically, what's your day only price?
It's probably half price. It's probably a 50% discount.
Yeah.
So Kyle's at $10K for any time, 24-hour roars, and you're $1K for day roars. Chris, what about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we said though it's going to happen at night, so really, I mean, that's what it could happen at any time, 20 times a day.
Yeah, your kids are waking up.
I was going to say, I got 5 and 7 year olds.
They're crying. They're getting scared.
School.
Yeah. Your wife's mad at you for this roar that you brought into your house by accepting a nominal amount of money.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I mean, 10 grand is, $2,500 a week to endure that. So a little over $300 a day.
I love the math happening.
What's your hey, it's every day in, day out. You're dealing with this, right?
I mean, I said 10 for a month of this, including sleep, because 20 times a day, that's not one time in the middle of the night. That's going to happen 3 or 4 times, which means you're not sleeping ever.
Awful sleep.
During the day. Yeah, oh, hey, that's that thing again. It's just annoying. If you ever live next to construction, it's annoying, but you start to tune it out because you're living your life. Sleeping time, that does not work.
Is there any chance you're so used to this and so exhausted that you do kind of tune this out? Kyle, think about some of your friends who live by the red line.
Yeah, but
it's not as loud, but it's a very similar thing, right? That thing's running 24 hours a day.
I mean, not many people live there. That's the whole thing.
They try not to. They're like, oh, the red line's here. I'm going to go live in another place over here.
Exactly. That's why those apartments are so discounted. That's the thing. They bake it in. I mean, look, I live across the street from an elementary school, and I hear that bell go off all the time during the day, and the first one goes off at 6:45 in the morning. I guess that's when the very first bell of the day goes off. So if I'm still in bed, during the week at that point, it still wakes me up. But like throughout the rest of the day, I don't even notice it anymore. Like you don't like it's not stadium volume, but you don't notice it. But like in the middle of the night when everything else is quiet, like this is the problem. Like I value my sleep. I'm sorry. I'll be a diva about it. I don't care.
10K. That's a good amount. Chris,
I think I need more than that because I'm just factoring in my kids. Yeah.
Bougie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got to add like 5K a kid. I feel
that's exactly what I was thinking. I need $500 a day to do this, which would be 15 grand basically.
15 grand.
Yeah, I'm going 15. Stadium volume in the middle of the night.
It's pretty damn loud. Straight. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
It's going to suck. So
I need $500 a day for that.
I'm older and feeble. I'm going to take 25K to do it. And that's going to sound like a lot of money. But like, I don't want to do it. I just don't want to have that thing in my life.
Lowball us with
no, I don't want to have that thing in my life. No. I'd rather get slapped in a slap contest than to deal with like that. That's one time. Like,
I wouldn't want that. No.
A whole month, man, it's going to impact your job. You're probably going to get a divorce because you're arguing with your wife the entire time. Like, it's a disaster.
You keep pretending in the slap contest, though, that your jaw wouldn't be broken.
I'm fine. Give me a mouthpiece. No, I got a really, really strong
jaw. Drink it through a straw for 6 months. You'd be like, man, I wish that cat was yelling in my ear.
I will say Kyle said his daytime price was $1,000. I feel like we can get that money together, Chris. You see where I'm going with this, Kyle? I need to install a large speaker in your apartment.
It's going to cost more for you to like set that up.
Better hope it doesn't run on Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go 3 times a day instead of 20.
Yeah. Look, man. You got to sell my wife on that one first, but her price might be a little bit higher. Let's say.
One thing about your wife is she probably hates Penn State too, as a Michigan grad, right?
Yeah, it's she's got some friends that went there, and so it's the same way we think of it. We're like, yeah, we don't like them, but yeah, they're not as important.
That's the best part about winning the best part about winning 7 straight against Penn State is they can't like claim rivalry. Like we don't give them that anyway, but they can't even claim it now. They're like, oh, they beat us 7 times in a row. We can't even talk. Like it's like Blue Jackets. Some Blue Jacket fans try to be like, oh, we're the Penn's rivals. Like they don't even know we exist, dude. What are we talking about over here? They won their first home game against Penn's in like 8 years, not too long ago, last season. Yeah. It's like, come on, man. So, hey, man, had a blast. Kyle, thanks for joining us. I do think, Chris, we should talk about getting $1,000 together and get that cat put in his apartment.
I'm in.
Because that would be a lot of fun. But I'm with you on you guys raised some good points. That thing going off all night is going to be rough. And 25K for me, nothing lower. And even then, I'd probably be pissed. I'd be like, man, this is the worst $25,000 I've ever made in my life. None of this was worth it, right?
I'm just going to drive an Uber for a month.
I imagine you're like getting 10K like that third night. You're like, man, what was I thinking? I should have said 100K. Thanks, Kyle. We always get smarter with you on the show. Chris, thanks to you too as well. Appreciate it, guys. Forget anything? We good? Ready for the game?
I think we're ready for the game.
Let's do it. We'll see you guys next week. Bucks got a big one tomorrow. As always, be good to each other. Take care of each other. Go Bucks.